What's up, everybody, and welcome back to Fireside Giants. I'm your host, Anthony Rivardo. Today, joined by a special guest, Brian Walker of DBacks Academy. Big friend of the channel. We've had him on many times, and you guys know when we want to talk secondary in football, we want to talk to Brian because he's an expert on the subject. And that's what we're going to discuss today. We're going to talk about the New York Giants secondary. We're going to talk about the team at large. We try to get to the bottom of what might be going wrong on the back end of that defense. So, Brian, thank you for joining me today, my friend. How are you doing, and how are you feeling about the way this New York Giants team has looked up and down throughout the start of the season?
Man, glad to be here. You guys are family to me. I'm doing well. The tough part is the Giants looked really, really good in the first three quarters. At the end, we all know the results. And, as we continue to talk about certain points, I think, our biggest thing right now, like we said before, is that secondary and what we can improve. So, no, I'm doing well, and I'm ready to talk about the secondary.
For sure. It's insane because for 3 quarters there, they looked like a playoff team. For the previous 4 quarters against Philadelphia, they looked like a playoff team. For 7 quarters, the New York Giants looked like a really good football team. And then in one quarter, it just all unraveled. Really tough stuff. And especially when you're looking at that final sequence by the defense, whether you want to point to the play calling to drop so many people back in coverage, you want to point to the defensive line for maybe not getting the pressure in time, whatever the particular reason is that they blew that game. The matter of the fact is they are 2-5, and you are what your record says you are, as Bill Parcells was famously quoted saying back in the day. But right now, this secondary has just been an up and down unit. They've had a lot of struggles this season. They've been banged up, sure, but they invested a lot into that secondary. What have you seen that either gives you some cause for confusion, concern? What is it about the secondary in particular to you that you think might be tripping up the defense?
Well, a few things, like you said before, they have invested. They brought in Holler, they brought in Paulson, who's a veteran corner with the Saints. I think at the end of the day, they expected those guys to lead the room. I'm not saying that they're not, right? But when you have vets in the room, especially with a young, inexperienced secondary, you tend to lean on those guys to lead the road. So I don't know what's going on in that aspect, but from the film aspect, few things I've seen. One, they're giving up too many big plays. They ranked in the NFL in regards to a lot of 20-plus passing yards and plays like that. They're giving up over 230-plus yards passing, which is ranked in the bottom of the NFL. I think the biggest thing is we expected certain young guys, especially Banks, to kind of step up and get invested into his play. We've had some bright spots. The pass rush is looking a lot better. We have bright spots in that. But like anything, like you said, in that game, this is where a lot of the young, inexperienced guys need their vets, because there's been a lot of misreads, misalignments. You can even blame the secondary players, but then it also goes to the scheme. I think for us, we have to know what type of DBs we have, and you can't go isolated man goal line and then get caught with rub routes or crossing routes. You know what I'm saying? Those are certain scheme plays that D coordinator, DB coach, you gotta call on. So the biggest thing is, I think, as they progress and they have a new spark, they can get better and start to know what type of players they have, and build on from there.
Yeah, the worrisome part of that is it still feels like they're figuring out this defense, trying to figure out what kind of talent they do and don't have in that secondary. But it's already week 7, now week 8 even. So it just feels like they're behind the 8 ball here, and that they're trying to play catch up. Even on the defensive line, I feel like they still don't really know what they have, and maybe they don't know how to utilize that effectively either. That pass rush seems to come and go. There's clearly talent, and I think there's talent in the secondary too. But for some reason, it's not translating to consistent results. But I want to talk about some of the guys in particular in that secondary, some specific players. Cordell Flott. Let's go positive first, and then we'll talk about some of the guys who maybe haven't looked so great. But Cordell Flott's having a breakout. He's looked really good. He's got an interception against the Philadelphia Eagles. He had 10 targets, I believe, against the Broncos and only let up 2 receptions. Looked really good on Sunday. Has looked really good all season. What have you seen from him that you like, that maybe you think has sparked this breakout that he's currently having?
Well, I think for him, he's a development player going into this 4th year. I think now he's getting adjusted to the speed of the game. A lot of times people don't realize DBs, when they're in different conferences, especially in college, those guys might not be as fast. The quarterbacks might not throw as far. But when you get to the NFL, especially in that type of conference he's in, where you got Dak and the Cowboys and a lot of other guys with the Eagles, you get exposed. But I think this offseason he improved, especially on his man, especially playing off. And like anything, you need turnovers to make plays. It just can't be I tackle, let the guy catch the ball. So he's done a great job of recognizing and understanding when and where to be. And I commend his fourth year as an improvement.
Yeah, definitely. That's a player that I remember when he was drafted. I actually think that we talked about him around the
Yeah.
time that he was drafted. We've had you on the channel so many times over the years. And I remember we all said developmental guy. Like, he might not have it together year one, year two, but eventually that breakout's going to come. And he's definitely got the tools and the traits. I think what really slowed him down and why it was a year four breakout or maybe not a year three breakout, for some reason, the Giants decided to give him a year where he played in the slot, where he was clearly never comfortable. Now he's finally back on the outside, and he's looked really good on the outside. But I know that kind of ties into a larger conversation that we've had, again, for years on this channel, you and I, fitting square pegs in the round holes. That's something that the New York Giants tried to do far too often. Doesn't matter which new coach comes in, they still try to fit these square pegs into round holes. So I want to get your perspective on that and how that kind of relates to the secondary. And if you see anybody in the secondary who might be currently used in a way that's not beneficial to their skill set.
So, we've talked about the history of it. I think even when I worked with Darnay, he never played slot when he was with the Giants. I mean, when he was with at UCLA, and literally I had to work with him, brick by brick, as you can say, playing that slot position. I think the biggest thing is development wise, we have to understand who our players are. And now this goes into a whole different realm of, I don't want to say just the Giants, but even the NFL. I think we understand that the game has changed. It's a passing league. It's not the 80s or the 90s where the running back was the focal point. I think the game is similar to arena football now, where everything's quicker, right? Which means that now you have quicker linemen, quicker linebackers. The passing game, the routes are quicker. So a lot of that means that a lot of the DB players who played in the 90s don't understand this concept or this game if they're coaches. Not saying they're not smart enough, but if you've never played arena football, and I've had the benefit to play both, arena football is one of those things where you almost feel like you're in the ocean by yourself because you have so many things coming at you at short little time. I think our athletes and our kids aren't being developed for the quick game, for that Kurt Warner, that game where that quarterback takes a quick drop back and he reads it. You know what I'm saying? So, when you said about putting pieces in situations that don't work, we've got to identify what player works well and what players are outside guy. I would be even recommend moving Paulson to safety. I think he's a big body. I think he's in a position in his career where maybe cornerback and playing that isolated island may not be for him. I'm not saying he's not good, but I think we've got to move things around. We also got to say this is the after effects of losing an all-pro Xavier McKinney. This is the part where we need that vet, that guy who makes plays. And so, unfortunately, when you lose those pieces, even you could have added Jabril to come in and be that face or help you out as a hybrid or a backup. But you need the energy in the secondary to kind of ramp up again. So that's the issue, is who's identifying those players and who's making sure that they put them in the right position to be successful.
Yeah, and it's a tough break for the Giants too. Like you mentioned, Paulson and Debo hasn't really looked like much of a fit so far in the defense. Even when he's been healthy, he's had his struggles. I think the same goes for Javon Holland too. They lost Xavier McKinney. They tried to spend money to replace Xavier McKinney by signing Javon Holland. Holland just hasn't looked comfortable in this defense, in my opinion. I know he's talented. I watched the film on him over in Miami, and he was a very good football player, a skilled defensive back with a nose for the football. That nose for the football hasn't really shown up so far this season when he's been healthy and on the field. And again, it just looks like there's a lack of comfort in this defensive scheme. So I guess I'll ask you this. When there's so many moving parts, new additions to a defense, you look at the defensive line, they added talent there with Chauncey Golson, Abdul Carter. In the secondary, of course, brand new starting safety, brand new starting cornerback. They switched out another cornerback. They switched out another safety. Like, they've moved so many things around. Continuity, how important is that? And how has maybe a lack of continuity and so many moving parts, how has that affected the defense, do you think?
Well, the biggest part about being in the secondary is you have to communicate. A lot of times, me playing the position at corner, I look for my safety to see things that I can't see because I'm limited to a certain part of the area. So if my safety doesn't communicate things, maybe emotion or whatever the dynamic, or if I don't communicate things as a corner, like a receiver going to do a crack block, then we can get put in situations where we don't succeed. So if I don't know this guy next to me and I don't know what he likes or what he can cover, then we're in an island in itself. And a lot of times it's a numbers game. You got to think a lot of these offensive coordinators get paid big bucks to make sure that they have a mismatch, whether it's 4-on-3, 2-on-1, you know what I'm saying? So it's a numbers game. And if people don't know each other, they're not going to be able to identify what that offense is trying to do and how to eliminate that.
Hey everyone, just a quick shout out to our sponsor, Sleeper. Want to win up to 100 times your money on game day? Sleeper is the #1 sports app with real-time scores, lightning fast news, and daily fantasy picks that take just seconds. Choose more or less on your favorite player's stats, cash in fast, and even chat with friends while you play. Right now on Sleeper, you can get a free $20 entry, no deposit required. That's right, free $20 entry with no deposit required. Plus, first-time users will still also receive a 100% deposit match up to $100. Download Sleeper today and use promo code FIRESIDE for a 100% deposit match up to $100 and a free $20 entry. That's code FIRESIDE. Do make sure to use our promo code when you sign up. Thank you so much to Sleeper for sponsoring this episode. Yeah, communication seems to have been an issue for the New York Giants throughout this season. Like, I feel like there's just been a lot of lapses. And another thing that you mentioned with certain players, I like what you were saying about the quick game. How there's a difficulty to adjust going from college to the pros with how quick the passing is and how maybe defensive backs aren't trained for that part of the game. That's been a problem for the New York Giants this season. The quick game has been killing them. A lot of it has to do with the fact that they're playing a lot of cover one, single high safety shells, and that man coverage is an off man coverage, but it's not just a 3-yard off the line of scrimmage. They're like 8-9 yards off the line of scrimmage. They're playing way off in this man coverage. How do you beat that? Okay, quick and easy slant route. And all of a sudden they break one tackle. Now you got a 15-yard gain. That's what I've seen all season long for the Giants. You can hear I'm getting animated about it because it frustrates the living hell out of me. And I don't know why they haven't adjusted the scheme, because they're just giving away free chunk yardage when they sit in this off cover one man 8 yards off the line of scrimmage. It drives me nuts. So I'll let you speak to that too and get your take on it. But that's the #1 thing I've noticed about this Giants defense this year. They're just giving up easy chunk plays and receptions game in and game out.
Yeah, no, like you said before, they're giving up easy plays. A lot of times, like I've said before, when you have an inexperienced type of secondary or you have a group that's never worked with each other, those plays are going to be the plays that usually are common issues on a defense, even an offense as well. But this is where the development matters. This is where you take each of your DB coaches, whether it's Adams, whether it's Burris, or even head guy, you take those guys and you go, hey, I need you to sit with this guy in the film room. Not saying they're not, but I need you to sit with this guy in the film room and let's develop him. When you think of a guy like Banks, who has the size, the speed, and all the qualities, you know what I'm saying? Why can't he not get this? Why can't he not make this work? This is something where, whether it's in the off season, they got to correct, or they got to reevaluate themselves and how they're approaching. Because at the end of the day, you can be speaking to me aggressively, but if you're speaking Spanish and I only know English, I'm not going to comprehend it. So whatever's being taught has to be taught. These are still young men. Their brains are not fully developed. Matter of fact, they're crashing their brains all the time. So let's take our time and some people learn different. This is why there's different parts of school where different people have to be in different rooms. So I think this is where the development for the NFL, development for the Giants has to kind of be, looked upon and say, what are we doing with this young group? Because you invested this money in it. How can we improve day by day, game by game? And you just got to get back to the basics. If they catch the ball, we tackle or punch the ball to get a fumble. If I'm in front of the ball, I pick it off. That simple. So that's really the simplest way I can explain it like that.
Yeah, and they did invest a lot into the secondary, as we've said, and you mentioned again right there. Not just money, though, draft picks too, like Deonte Banks, who you kind of touched on there. Banks, former first-round pick. When I watched Banks at Maryland, and I know we talked about him when he was a rookie, when the Giants first drafted him, my impression of him was big, physical, press cornerback. Not press man. A lot of people wanted to label him press man. He's a press zone corner. Maryland runs a lot of that cover 3 zone where he's just got to cover 1/3 of the field. And in addition, when you're playing that zone coverage, your back isn't to the football. Everything is in front of you. You read and you react. And that was the number one thing that I thought Banks had coming out of Maryland. Instincts. I thought he had very good read and reaction skills. He could sit in a zone and he could jump on those routes that come into his zone. If you go back and you watch Maryland versus Ohio State, Deonte Banks versus Marvin Harrison Jr., he wasn't behind him trailing in man coverage throughout that game. A lot of it was kept in front of him, and he had a lockdown game. I think Marv had 40 yards against him. It was a great performance from Deonte Banks. But since he's gotten to the Giants, what's he been doing? One-on-one, cover man, turning away from the football, and it drives me insane. Even if you look at this game on Sunday afternoon where that big reception was led up to Cortland Sutton down the left sideline in the final 30 seconds of the game or whatever it was, Deonte Banks was in coverage. But what coverage was Deonte Banks playing? Man coverage with his back to the football. He never saw the ball coming in, so it went right over his head, and Cortland Sutton made an excellent catch. To me, it just feels like I'm just a guy who sits on the couch and sits in my office chair and watches these games and talks about them. Why can I see this? It's so obvious to me, but the Giants keep trotting Banks out there and asking him to do the one thing that he can't do. It drives me up a wall, and I want to get your take on that. If you see it the same way that I do, and if you have a perspective that maybe I'm misunderstanding or maybe the Giants are misunderstanding, just what's your take on it with Deonte Banks, the way he's been used, and why the potential has come so far from being realized so throughout the first few seasons of his career?
No, I'll keep it, for the viewers to understand. In a sense, you don't draft Revis to play zone. You don't draft Richard Sherman to play man. Not saying those guys can't do that, but you draft players, like you said, to be in a situation that makes them successful. Success is situational. So when you have a young man who has that type of size and that speed, you put him in a opportunity where he allows him to play the ball, be aggressive, be comfortable. If that's the case, then as coaches, we adapt to our players. It's not the other way around. And I think a lot of times we get consumed with the scheme and the playbook that we don't realize it's the Jimmies and the Joes. So on that situation, this is where I try to highlight for Banks. I would tell Banks, start to be a little more patient. And if you're trailing a lot of times, this means you're reaching probably with the wrong hand, which means if this guy is going to my left, right, which would be the viewer's right, I can't reach with an offhand and I'm like this with the same hand because one, I lock my shoulders and I lock my hip. I'm not able to run. If he's going to my left, I've got to hit him with my offhand, my right, because it allows me to basketball shuffle or run to the route. Like little details like that keep you in front. But once again, I'll bring you back to this is development, and a lot of the coaches are from the 90s or late 2000s where it was I formation. Mike Allstott was your lead tailback, and it was like, give it, throw it to the tight end, whatever the dynamic may be. Everything's spread out. You have tight ends who run 4.4s and 4.3s. So the game is a lot faster, which means these guys have to be able to be put in positions that allow them to be successful. If he's playing cover 3 in Maryland, it's going to be very hard to adjust when everybody's elite to play man back to the ball. So, off-season wise, this is where guys work and put the added ingredients in. But if it's not working, you got to get to some of the basics. And like I said, at the end of the day, the pass rush has to be there. No DB is successful without a successful pass rush. And that is important, whether it's from our linebackers in regards to the blitzing, whether it's from the DNs, whether it's a 3-4, 4-3, how we show things. This is where having inexperienced guys, I know we had 5 rookies at one point on the field. this is where making sure that we're not misaligned and we're playing to our strengths.
Absolutely. We'll talk some about the offense and just the team in general, once we shift away from the secondary for a little bit before we wrap up. But just final touching points on the secondary. Again, a lot of the vitriol from the fans has been directed at the defensive coordinator. It's more play calling in specific situations, right? When there's 8 seconds left and they're dropping 8, and all of a sudden they're letting up a big reception downfield and they're allowing the team to get in field goal range. That's happened more than once so far this season. And I just kind of want to get your take on it, your perspective, how you feel about it, because I know you love the Giants same way as everybody else. You want to see this team be successful. And so when you're watching these players put into disadvantageous positions, what's your perspective on it? And, just how do you feel about the way Shane Bowen, the defensive coordinator, has called some of these games and the way that he's maybe not put the team in the best position to win in some of these situational play calls?
Yeah, at the end of the day, I'll say this. I'll take something from Deion Sanders. 95% of the players or DBs in the league aren't trying to make a play. So, of course, the defensive coordinator has to put you in the right positions. But if that ball's in the air, you have to make a play. And I think you have to become offensive. This is where, if it's 8 dropping, this is where the DBs get hungry and they go, hold on, they're passing now. They're not going to run. This is not a draw. This is my opportunity to make a play for my team. I have to see who that player is. You know what I'm saying? And this is where it comes to the attitude of the defense, because offensively, the attitude is there. We want to smash you and whatever the dynamic is with those 2 young rookies. But who do we have that we can say in our secondary has that same bravado? And playing the DB position, you have to have a lot of confidence. You also have to have a lot of belief in yourself. And hopefully the DB and coach dynamic and that relationship, maybe they're talking in a room and sitting down and that belief is getting stronger. But if it's crunch time and you're dropping 8, somebody has to make a play. At the end of the day, those kids are from the 7-on-7 era, so they know how to cover, so they say. But it's just one of those things where, of course, like I said before, you have to know what type of players you have, and you can't run certain calls. But you're dropping 8. I'm not a fan of the we're playing prevent, but I understand. We're dropping 8. They're driving the ball. Somebody make the damn play. So, that's where I stand on that one.
I think that's a nice perspective to gain, especially because it's a little bit different from most Giants fans who are totally against dropping 8. There are teams that drop 8 in those situations and they succeed. They shut out the defense and the offense and the defense finds a way to get a stop and to win. A lot of Giants fans are saying we shouldn't be dropping 8, we should be getting after it. But you're kind of bringing a different perspective saying that's not necessarily the full problem here. The problem is that the DBs aren't making the plays. And you're not wrong at all by saying that, because when you really watch through the film on Sunday's game and you see that big reception that Bo Nix completed to Marvin Mims, there's a defensive back. I'm not going to call him out because whatever, but he was completely turned around on an in route. I mean, like, what are we doing? It's prevent defense, sit down and stand in front of where the passing lane is and knock the ball out. Instead, he gets completely turned around, and then you got an open player across the middle of the field. Like, there is an element to it that the players need to execute. Players do need to be better.
Yeah, no, I've been, look, I'll tell you this. I'll even go to high school, where I was fortunate to be a part of Pepper's career and Rashawn Gary's career, and even seeing Minka, where he almost came onto my team. But I'll tell you this, I even say it really is important who you have on the field, because I'll give you a situation. We were playing against IMG, and we literally told the DB, hey, it's going to be a deep pass. Get into cover 3 or go into cover 4, play the deep route. He stood there, watched the ball go over his head, and on TV, on ESPN, for the school I was coaching with against IMG, we literally, I'm sure everybody said, what the hell is the DB coaches doing? Or what the hell is the defensive coordinator doing? A lot of times you get those players, like I said before, this is where being young and inexperienced, this is where it hurts you. And this is where having a vet, i.e. someone who's in Green Bay right now, who could be helping us right now, So that's something that's important.
Yeah, I'm with you. The loss of McKinney, I think, has just had a significant effect on this defense. It hasn't looked the same since then. But even still, again, like against Philadelphia in week 7, defense looked elite, looked shut out. And that was a lot of it. The pass rush was
Yep.
just getting home. The secondary had some great plays as well, of course, but they were playing as a full unit. They were sending blitzes. They were dropping off in different situations. They were playing with cohesion. Yesterday, they did that for 3 quarters, or on Sunday, rather, did that for 3 quarters. And then that fourth quarter, no cohesion. They weren't sending the blitzes. Dexter Lawrence wasn't even on the field when they were playing prevent defense. You know, like you got to have your right guys on the field in the right situation, because if you're only rushing 3, why wouldn't those 3 rushing be your best guys at rushing? Dexter Lawrence can win off the line of scrimmage in a second to get in the face of the quarterback, and he's not even on the field for that play. So there's just, I don't even know how to explain that one, because that's just, you know, you're putting you're in that disadvantageous position.
No, you're 100% correct. You can't play with one hand behind your back, and if you don't have Dexter Lawrence, who's one of the top elite guys in the league, then you're telling yourself, then you know what, we don't know what we're doing. Obviously, you are who your record is. I don't care how much momentum that you think you have. You are who your record is. You know, I also will say this: at some point, it can be draining when you see certain plays or certain, you know, I'll play devil's advocate for a lot of it. You know, if offense goes 3 and out really, really quick, defensively, it is draining to go back on the field and have to reevaluate and play again. So it has to, everybody as a team has to be connected and coincide. But it really, like we said before, we need our young guys to step up. And now the experience needs to become better. And then the communication needs to become better in regards to that whole group.
Absolutely. Before we do wrap up, we'll go positive for a little bit. We'll flip over to that offensive side of the ball. You just mentioned young guys need to step up, make some plays, bring some energy. How about Jackson Dart, Cam Scadaboo, though, right? Because if they were going to win that game, it's because Jackson Dart battled through some serious adversity. The rookie was out there against a top-tier defense. I mean, Pat Surtain on the other side, Nick Bonito. They have some dogs on that defensive line for the Denver Broncos. And you know what? Jackson Dart looked completely unfazed. He's excited, and he gives me hope for the future. I think there's serious potential there. And same thing with Cam Scadaboo. So, you know, what's your take on these young guys on the Giants offense?
No, I love it. I think that they're bringing juice and they're bringing a certain energy that I think we didn't have. Not to knock the quarterbacks in the past, but there wasn't really much personality really with our quarterbacks. You know, Eli's funny now. You know, we see him in commercials, but he was very quiet. I think even with Jones was very quiet at times. So I think what Jackson is doing, he's bringing a new wave of life. And even with the coaches, I think he's giving that certain energy. And he's so mobile. You know, he's a tough guy. I do worry that, you know, we don't want to run him so much that he can get exposed. But this is where we have, I call him Bam Bam, the running back. But this is where we have him, where I think he brings a certain toughness, old New York Giants toughness, where you had Parcells and you had that defense and you had those running backs like O.J. Anderson, you had Phil Simms and Jeff Hostetler. You had those guys who were tough, hard-nosed. I'm going to run right through you. North Jersey football, New York football. He reminds me of a lot of those running backs, Brian Toll and Greg Toll and all those guys. But, you know, the dynamic is, I think with those guys, we got to protect them. I'm excited for the future. I think once they get a full year and taste of the NFL, the offseason is going to be amazing. I don't know what's going to happen in the coaching staff, but I think Jackson is prepared because it's not like he's not been in different systems within a year or so. He went from USC to Ole Miss. So I think he's prepared for whatever the dynamic is. And I love for the fact that he has personality and he's bringing a hip-hop flavor that I think the Giants are craving and missing, especially in New York.
100% agree with that. I just love his personality, the bravado, the moxie, whatever you want to call it, the swagger, the aura. He's got it, you know, and it's something that the Giants haven't had at that position in years. So I think it's really important and it's really fun to watch. It's just a question of, is the coaching staff the right one to maximize him? Is the coaching staff going to be here for the rest of the year into next year? You know, those are all big questions that we have. So I guess we'll wrap up with that. If you want to, you know, give your take on coaching staff, you want to give your take on anything else New York Giants, we'll do that before we wrap.
Yeah, no. My biggest thing is for the coaching staff, I think this is a these few games, you need to sit down with whoever your vets are, and I don't want to say have a team meeting, but this is a come to, they say come to Jesus, or a come to whatever the dynamic or whatever faith you believe in. If you are a football player, this is where you knuckle down, and everything that's distraction, whether it's your family, whether it's the outlets, whether it's social media, you really lock down and really go, hey, let's make the playoffs. I think for the coaching staff, I think for the head coach especially, he understands this might be the best job he's ever had. Okay, yeah, no, really the biggest thing I wanted to say for the Giants management is maybe even looking into the mirror and just understanding if we keep getting the same results, maybe we have to look at the coaching staff and the coaches that we keep hiring. I don't want to knock anyone in their job, but every coach has had that 2 to 3 year window where they're just not getting to those players where there should be improvement, and you look at it now like a guy like Brian Flores who flourished. He looks like a genius on both sides when talked about Tua in Miami in that situation, and that's not doing well. And even the opportunity to be a Giants coach where defensively we're lacking. I think this is where the improvements of who we hire represents our team just as much as our players and our coaches, So that's really the biggest thing as a Giants loyal fan. And, I'm just, like we said, we're tired of seeing the same results. So
that's for sure. I'd like to see better results. And listen, I think that there's been signs of improvement at times during the season, but at the same time, it's largely been more of the same. They are 2-5, and they are falling behind in the race for the NFC East, which they're technically still in, but it's going to take a real uphill climb. And we'll see, of course, how it goes for the rest of the season, though. Hopefully the secondary improves. Hopefully this defense improves. And we're definitely going to be excited to watch the development of Jackson Dart and Cam Scatterbo for the rest of the year. But Brian, really do appreciate you coming on and talking some New York Giants football with me. Where can the people find you at?
They can find me on Instagram, DBacks Academy, and you can also find me on Twitter.
All right, Brian had some technical difficulties there, but guys, do make sure to show him some love and follow him on Instagram and Twitter at DBacks Academy. And I do appreciate all of you tuning into this episode of Fireside Giants. Plenty more content, of course, on the way as always, as we continue to break down Giants versus Broncos and soon enough start previewing Giants versus Eagles and discussing the trade deadline, everything you want here on the channel. Just be sure to subscribe if you're new and ring the bell so you don't miss an episode. Leave a like if you enjoyed, subscribe, comment your thoughts down below, and do make sure to follow us on all of our social media channels at Fireside Giants. Without further ado, I'll catch you all in the next one. Have a good one, and let's go New York Giants.